Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing the long overdue follow-up to my 5-star predictions video. So I made this 5-star predictions video in either January, like early January, or December of 2021. And my goal had been to update these every 6 months. So to be able to do a 5-star prediction and then read those books over the course of 6 months. But obviously I got a little off track with this one. But I have finally, as of yesterday, finished the last book that I needed to for this list. And I am ready to tell you all about it. So if you are newer to the channel, then I can link that 5-star predictions video below, and then you can watch that for a sense of why I thought that certain books should end up on this list, why I thought that for me these books in particular would be 5 stars. And it was really fun. This is the second time that I have done this, and I was not super successful the first time, and you shall see whether or not I was successful the second time. If, again, you haven't been watching the channel for a long time, I don't feel like I'm particularly stingy with 5 stars. I think in any given year, it's usually about like 20% of the books that I read. And there are usually two main reasons for books being given a 5-star rating. So either it's a book that I think is very well done for the type of book it is. So, you know, if it's a romance, then it fits the tropes and conventions of the romance genre. If it's fantasy, it gives me what I'm expecting from fantasy. So that's how you can get, you know, some differences between genres. But usually it either has to be a book that is going to become an all-time favorite. So one that I just know I'm going to keep reading, I'm going to keep loving, keep thinking about long after I have read it. Or it is a book that is just so well crafted, whether it is in terms of the prose or really original ideas or something about the execution that I feel like merits a full 5 stars. So it can be for either one of those reasons. There are certainly many books that I have given 5 stars that I think technically are probably not at the height of their craft, but they just spoke to me personally. And there are some books that I probably wouldn't refer to as a favorite of all time, but I just think that they were done so well that I had to give them the full 5 stars. And we'll talk about the 8 books. I'm just going to give you a quick rundown. I have my like post-it that has been here with me since I did this video stuck to the front of my, like on the keyboard of my laptop, judging me every single time that I open the laptop. Actually, this is the second post-it because the first one got like so tattered that I had to replace it and put another post-it there, but it has, regardless, it has sat there on my laptop keyboard silently judging me every time that I opened it up. But I have vanquished the post-it and this list, and I am ready to tell you the books. So the 8 predictions that I made were for the books Tagana by Guy Gabriel Kay, Daughter of the Moon Goddess, Piranesi, 11/22/63, The Binding, Hamlet, Boy's Life, and Blood Song. So a range of genres. So we've got some fantasy, we've got some historical fiction, we've got some literary fiction, and I think that's probably it for the main on this list. So those are the 3 types of books that we have, and the results were varied. But we will start off with Tagana because I'm just going to go down through the list in the order that I listed them. And Tagana is a strong start because I absolutely gave this book 5 stars. I read Tagana, I think it was like May or June. It was sometime in like the late spring or early summer, and it had been one of those books that was just a lifer, like on my eternal TBR. I had owned a copy for like a decade, had even wanted to read it before that, and I just had never gotten around to it. And then this year I finally, with a bunch of different people on Discord, read it and loved it. There were many reasons that I gave Tagana 5 stars, but I loved the writing. Guy Gabriel Kay's prose is beautiful. I really enjoyed the characters, particularly the antagonists in this story. I thought he did a really good job with one antagonist in particular, making this person feel multi-dimensional. Like I don't know, I feel like the word gray is overused now on BookTube and in general, but he was an antagonist that you could feel for. Like you had empathy for some of the choices that he made, even though you could not really be on his side given what he had done. But it was an interesting angle to take. And I really liked the way that Guy Gabriel Kay built his world. So I am not a particular fan of very intricate world building. I do not need to know the history going back eons, the religious beliefs, the way of dress, I do not need to know all of those societal details when I read a fantasy book. In fact, I prefer not to. I like it when some details come out organically in the story and they can paint a picture of the society for me, but I don't want to feel like I'm reading a textbook necessarily when I am getting this kind of like deluge of information about the world that the character lives in. So I thought that Guy Gavriel Kay struck a very good balance here. I enjoyed the details that we did get about Tagana and about the characters. And I liked how he incorporated cultural aspects such as music and wine and different parts of their society came to life in very vibrant ways without ever feeling like he was info dumping. So I thought that that was very well done. And I think that most of that is just a function of his writing. He's such a good technical writer that he weaves those kinds of details into his books quite easily. And it just worked really well for me. Tagana had a beautiful ending. I loved the end of this book, and it just all came together as a 5-star experience. It made me want to pick up more by Guy Gavriel Kay, and that will certainly be a reading goal for 2023. I will have several of his books on my must-read list next year. Number 2 was Daughter of the Moon Goddess, and this one came close. I gave Daughter of the Moon Goddess 4.5 stars. It didn't quite meet that 5-star level for me, and I think it is because it had a bit of a bumpy start. So I will say that it took me a little bit to feel like I could really sink into this story, and parts of it felt like they remained surface level. There were some parts of the relationship building and some parts of the character progression that I felt like could have been expanded upon or handled in a slightly different way. But it did get a 4.5 stars because I thought that it was great fun. This is an excellent book if you are someone who's really used to reading YA fiction or YA fantasy and you want to transition over to adult fantasy, because it plays with a lot of tropes that are common in YA, and it does have a strong coming of age, like a really strong growth arc for the main character. But there are some adult scenarios as well. It is a kind of leveled up adult romance. There are some, some parts that are violent and some situations that you might not see as often in YA fantasy, but I think it's a great transition book. It sits well on the cusp there. I liked the writing style. It did take me a little bit to get into it, but once I was used to it, I enjoyed it. I really liked the main character, and there were some tropes that I typically dislike that I really liked in this book. So I was super happy that I read it. I will probably read it again before too long, and I just really ended up liking it. All right, had an unexpected visitor. I don't know if you could see the furtive eye gaze in the when I was talking about the end of Daughter of the Moon Goddess, but had to answer the door. I am back. The third book that I want to talk about is Piranesi, and this one also got 5 stars. We're starting off strong in this video, but this is the book that I finished yesterday. So I have not talked about this in a wrap-up or anything else. I will try to keep it brief, but many people had recommended this book to me, and many of the people who know my reading taste said that they felt like this would be a 5-star read for me, and they were absolutely correct. It's difficult to say what I enjoyed about Piranesi because it's a hard book to talk about in general, but I will just say that I liked the writing style. It fit the story very well. It was mysterious and kind of whimsical, and you wanted to just like fall into it, to just let yourself be absorbed by it. And the story itself was very weird, but in a good way. It was emotional. I was not expecting the range of emotions that I was going to feel when I read this book, but it was melancholy and it was also joyful. The tone at sometimes was very forlorn. Like I felt like my heart was just being tugged as I read this book, but in the best way possible. And it was short, but sometimes I struggle with short books, but while I would have happily read more, I didn't necessarily feel like it required more. I think that the story gave exactly what it needed to give, and it was just so lovely. That was probably the least helpful summary of a book ever to try to convince somebody else to read it, but I loved it. If you like the weird and wonderful and kind of hazy, dreamy like fantasy, almost like the same tone that you would get from The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. Very different books, not a lot in common in terms of content, but the feeling. If you liked the way that that book made you feel, then maybe you will like Piranesi. But absolutely 5 stars. I will reread this definitely, and I'm looking forward to reading it a second time to see how I feel about certain parts now that I know what happens in the entirety of the story and how the story ends. So happy that I read that. Everybody who told me that it was going to be a 5-star read, you were correct. Number 4 is 11/22/63. So this is one of Stephen King's newer books. I believe this one came out in 2011. And this one is in the vein of all of Stephen King's best books, very difficult to give a genre categorization to. So it is part sci-fi, part historical fiction, part, I guess not contemporary fiction. Yeah, but part contemporary fiction because there is time travel involved and lots of the kind of slice of life stuff that he does so well. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. And I think what held it back from being a full 5 stars is it's just not a favorite book of all time for me. But it is a very good book. And if you like Stephen King's writing, I can't imagine that you wouldn't like this book. There were throwbacks to older books by him. So if you are a big classic King fan and you want to read something modern, you must read this. There's a lot here to enjoy, but there's one scene in particular that I just, like every friend that I have who loves Stephen King, I messaged at that point to be like, I'm at the part, and it was so good. It was so heartwarming, and I just loved it. It is, like I said, it involves time travel, which honestly might be one of the reasons why I didn't give it 5 stars, because I'm actually not a very big time travel fan. I don't enjoy it, and it didn't detract from this book for me, but it certainly wasn't one of those things where I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna boost it to the top for me. And I think just in general, the topic of JFK, because this is what the premise of the novel is the main character goes back in time to try to stop the assassination of JFK. And that particular historical topic does not hold a lot of weight with me. I was interested in like a perfunctory sort of way, and I liked it as a concept, but it is not a historical event where I was like, I must know every detail. I'm so looking forward to this. But the relationship building was great. That kind of slice of life dynamic that Stephen King writes so well was excellent. I thought the pacing was quite good. I know some people have some trouble like in the middle. They think it drags on a little bit, but I could read anything that Stephen King wrote and feel like it was, a great time. So I really, really liked it. It did not quite make the boost up to 5 stars for me, but it was a 4.5 star book. After that, one book got nixed from this list, and that was The Binding. And I still am interested in reading it, but I did not want this to go on any longer. I recorded a new 5-star predictions video, which you will see later this week, months ago, because I had assumed that I would be finished. So you will go back and see like my hair is like totally long and it's absolutely different, but I just didn't want to drag this out any longer. So unfortunately, The Binding got a bit of the boot, but I will read it. It is still high priority for me. I am still going to hold the hope alive that it will be a 5-star read for me, but unfortunately, it did not make its way onto this list. After that, we have Hamlet. So Hamlet is, I guess you could call it historical / literary fiction. It is a novelization of how Shakespeare goes through and processes, Shakespeare and his wife, how they go through and process the loss of their son, Hamlet. So it gives us kind of some insight, supposed insight. So this is all kind of projection on part of the author because we have very little information about Shakespeare's marriage and his relationship. There is a lot of speculation. There are a lot of rumors. He married a woman who was quite a bit older than him. People speculate on the nature of their relationship and how well they did or didn't get along just based on things like his will or where she resided for most of the year. People extrapolate details based on a relationship that is hundreds of years old because that's all the detail that we have about it. So if you like reading historical fictions, this is fiction, about real people, then this book, the premise of the book might appeal to you. Where I think this book really succeeds is in its portrayal of grief. So this is about the loss of Shakespeare and his wife's son. His name is Hamlet, and it is devastating. I gave this book, so I forgot. Amongst all that, I forgot to tell you what I gave it. So I gave this 4.5 stars. It didn't quite make the 5-star rating for me, but the portrayal of grief, like I said, is devastating. It is heart-wrenching. It is raw and visceral. I spent the latter half of this book trying to hold back tears the entire time. And there was no one event that made me cry, because you go into this book knowing what it is about. You know it is about the loss of their son and how they dealt with it. And it's told in a dual timeline. So it's about how the relationship starts and then how this loss comes to pass and how they process it. And the passages where Hamlet's mother is trying to process his loss and working through her grief is horrible. Like, it's excellent. It is written really, really well, but it's so painful. Like I said, I felt like I just had this gaping wound in my chest the whole time I was reading it. I don't know if it is because I am a mother. My son is not that much younger than his son was, or their son. I don't know why I keep talking about Shakespeare. His wife is really the main character in this book. But the loss of their son is it's just so difficult to read. And I thought, because it was so powerful and because the grief was so visceral, it deserved the 4.5 stars. I found the beginning of the novel actually dragged a little bit, and I thought that I was going to end up giving it like 3 or 3.5 stars for most of the way through. But just that portrayal of grief is something. The only other book that has impacted me in that way is Pet Sematary by Stephen King. Very, very different books. But they both had the same impact on me as a parent, and it was just heartbreaking to read. So really glad that I read it. Will never read it again because it made me far too sad. But if you are looking for a book about that kind of portrayal of grief, it has a lovely lyrical writing style, then definitely check it out. After that, we have Boy's Life. This one was also a 5-star read. So Boy's Life by Robert McCammon, which is kind of partially historical fiction / magical realism. I read this earlier in the year. I think I might have read this in February. It doesn't seem like that long ago, because as a 5-star book, it still stands out very brightly, very vividly in my mind. I loved this book. It is not a perfect book, but it was perfect for me. It combines coming of age elements with like a hint of magical realism and just a slice of small town life for this young boy. And it was so, so enjoyable. It, again, much like with Tagana, made me want to read more of Robert McCammon's work. I think Swan Song will probably be one of my high priority books for 2023, but I don't remember because it's been so long since I filmed this video, but I think this is the one that I felt most confident in my prediction. Like, if any of them were going to be 5-star reads, I felt like it was going to be this one, and it indeed ended up being a 5-star read. So that was fantastic. Loved that book. And then the very last one, we'll save the saddest one for last. So this is Blood Song by Anthony Ryan, I think his last name is, and I gave this one 3.5 stars. And to be honest, maybe I shouldn't have even given it the 1/2 star, because trying to remember back, like, it feels very muddy to me. Like, it just wasn't the book for me. I felt like it was very bland. The main character was fine. The magic system was fine. The story was fine. But I had heard so many people talk about it and talk about how amazing it was. It was kind of this, in terms of modern fantasy, but with classic fantasy tropes, was going to be something that you would likely love. There was, again, this kind of coming of age element about training at an assassin type school, like things that I love, tropes in fantasy or plot setups in fantasy that I usually adore. And it just fell really flat for me. I did not enjoy it that much. It was fine. Like, I liked it, but it just didn't leave any kind of impact on me. I haven't felt particularly compelled to continue on with the story, and I was sad about it because I really wanted to love it, and I thought that I would. It seemed like something that was going to hit all of my particular fantasy buttons, but it did not, sadly. And that is how we end the video. So in terms of how successful this was, I mean, I got through 7 of the 8 books, but I feel like if we had to wait for 8 out of 8, it'd be 2024, and I probably would still be trying to put this video together. So 7 out of 8 is not bad. And of those 7 books, 3 of them were 5 stars. So I think this was more successful than the first time I did this, but hopefully I will get better at these as time goes on. Please let me know if you read any of these. Did you give them 5 stars? Are you particularly good at predicting 5 stars for yourself? And most importantly, what I would really like to know is what books that you have never heard me talk about do you think I would give 5 stars? Because I already have another predictions video in the works. It will be up later this week, but I'm always interested to know because the channel's been up for a while. Some of you have been watching for quite some time. I feel like you understand my tastes very well. So please give me some of your 5-star predictions for me. What do you think that I would love? And hopefully they will be books that I can add to my TBR for 2023. But that is it. Sorry for this very, very, very late discussion of my 5-star predictions, but I will see you in the next couple of days with a video from the past. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.